After a winding narrative about Abraham and Sarah and God's ongoing and repeated promises to them, Sarah finally conceives and bears a son whom they name Isaac. Interestingly, the stories about Isaac himself are rather limited, almost as if he's a transitional character in the narrative. Even so, we can't move on through the story of Abraham and Sarah's dysfunctional family without lingering at least briefly on this figure, Isaac. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Thursday, October 13th, 2022. Before I begin, first a word of apology. I've had to throw a couple of devotionals from the archives at you this week because it has been, well, one of those hectic weeks. Not much of an excuse, I grant you, but there it is. So, the story of Isaac includes the difficult-to-hear story of Abraham's willingness to sacrifice him at God's command, only to be saved at the last possible moment when God becomes fully convinced that Abraham actually trusts God. Years pass, Sarah dies, and Abraham sends one of his servants back to his father's land to find a wife for Isaac from among his own people, so he wouldn't be married to a Canaanite woman. The servant meets Rebekah, granddaughter of Nahor, Abraham's brother, and returns with her to meet Isaac. They marry, and in due course she conceives and bears twin sons, Jacob and Esau. It is really only after the birth of these sons, and even only after they grow up, that Isaac really and truly takes center stage, and this for only a hot minute. And in this story, he proves himself to be a chip off the old block. The story begins with God appearing to Isaac to renew the covenant he had originally made with his father Abraham. The story begins, "Now there was a famine in the land, besides the former famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Gerar, to King Abimelech of the Philistines. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, 'Do not go down to Egypt. Settle in the land that I shall show you. Reside in this land as an alien, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and to your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will fulfill the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands. And all the nations of the earth shall gain blessing for themselves through your offspring, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws.'" So, in this passage, two things happen at once. A famine strikes, just as it had happened when Abraham had first settled in the Promised Land. Only this time, God commands Isaac not to seek refuge in Egypt, as Abraham had done, but to settle as a resident alien in a new land that God would show him. This is absolutely parallel to what had happened to Abraham in the first place, only in a slightly different order. Then God renews the covenant promise with Isaac, the promise that he had originally made with Abraham. God promises to be with Isaac and bless him, to give the land to his descendants, to make the number of his descendants like the number of the stars in the heavens, and finally, that all the nations of the earth would find blessing through his offspring. Now Isaac does as God commands. He seeks refuge from the famine in the land of Gerar, in the territory of King Abimelech the Philistine, in what is now roughly the Gaza Strip near the Mediterranean Sea, just as his father had sought refuge in Egypt. And as if to complete the circle, we read the following. "So Isaac settled in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, 'She is my sister.' For he was afraid to say, 'my wife,' thinking, 'or else the men of the place might kill me for the sake of Rebekah, because she is attractive in appearance.' When Isaac had been there a long time, King Abimelech of the Philistines looked out of a window and saw him fondling his wife. So Abimelech called for Isaac and said, 'So she is your wife? Why then did you say she is my sister?" Isaac said to him, "Because I thought I might die because of her." Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, "Whoever touches this man or his wife shall be put to death." Mercy, like father, like son. Both men pass their wives off as their sisters because they fear being killed and their wives taken from them. But in this case, Rebekah, unlike Sarah, is not taken into the king's house as one of his wives. Instead, Abimelech deduces from observation that Rebekah is not Isaac's sister, but is in fact his wife. So he scolds Isaac for his deception, which he believes could have put his people at risk, then commands all of his people to refrain from harming either Isaac or Rebekah. The story ends with Isaac remaining in the land and becoming prosperous there, just as Abraham had prospered in Egypt. So what are we to take from this story? Well, there are several lessons here, but the one that seems most relevant here is the repeated behavior of a patriarch taking matters into his own hands to protect himself from perceived danger at the expense of his own wife, and then the action of God to continue to bless him, even in spite of this apparent lack of trust. It is a wonderful story, and it does remind us that even when we fail to trust God, God remains faithful. Tomorrow, Rebekah conspires with her favorite child. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.